Much smaller crowd, love it. Who was here this morning? Is everybody? Okay, this is good because you don't have to listen to me introduce myself again. So, all right, but take a look at this. What does this bumper magnet say to you guys? It's a Tyrannosaurus Rex eating a Jesus fish. See, non-Christians see dinosaurs as a problem for the Bible, and this magnet says the existence of dinosaurs proves that the Bible is wrong, so I don't have to follow Jesus. Now, how comfortable would you be explaining to the driver of this car how dinosaurs really do not only fit into the Bible, but actually support the Bible and Jesus? Sometimes maybe not. So I hope I can change that and that we can be confident after this. Okay, again, we're going to talk about dinosaurs. You're still going to get a gospel message and hear, a lot about the Bible itself, because that's what we're doing. But definitely, we're going to focus on dinosaurs today. Now, dinosaurs may not seem to be the most spiritual topic, but they are very important, not only to our faith, but how we accept the Bible as God's inerrant word. Unfortunately, dinosaurs, more than any of other God's creatures, are used by evolutionists as a tool to teach our young kids that the Bible isn't trustworthy. It's purported as evidence of evolution. The message is that dinosaurs lived millions of years ago is constantly pushed on us, which of course is not what we read in Genesis. Let me get through the introductions. All right, so why am I talking about dinosaurs? I am definitely not a paleontologist. All my endeavors, as far as flying and whatnot, require things to be very logical, rational, and consistent. And for me, this was never a problem with the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus Christ. These are well-established historical facts, and there's plenty of books that substantiate the biblical account of Jesus. But when I was growing up, I was taught about evolution, how the earth and dinosaurs were millions of years old, and it was never explained any arguments that support the Genesis timeline as actual history. So you have creation versus evolution, and really these two cannot coexist as much as people try to reconcile them. And I generally avoided the topic even though I knew that this was a problem, and no surprise, this did not work very well. So a friend of mine told me about Creation Ministries, kind of the same story from this morning. He was able to answer my questions on dinosaurs. And that really restored my faith. Not only it made my faith stronger in Jesus, but also restored my trust in the Bible all the way through. And because it was such a kind of a mind-blowing realization that, wow, this entire Bible is accurate, that this is why I continue to speak in churches, because it was such a mind-blowing experience for me. We talked about it this morning. If you have a creation-related question, creation.com is the way to go. Fantastic. So think about this. Where did you get most of the information on what you know or what you think you know about dinosaurs? We've got library, news, museums, but where do we really get most of our information? It's movies, right? If we think about how much we know about dinosaurs, a lot of that comes from the movies. So who's a Jurassic Park fan? Couple? Okay. This is from one of the more recent movies called Jurassic World Dominion. And does anyone know what this dinosaur is in the movie? Okay, it is called the Pyroraptor, which stands for fire thief. This guy is mean. You do not want to mess with him. But is it real? So first of all, how tall is that guy? He barely comes up to my waist. He's basically the size of a big turkey. So not that big and scary. And there is no evidence that he had any feathers whatsoever. And if you look at the slide, you see the little couple of white bones and teeth. That's all we have of this animal. Everything else is made up. That's the only parts that we've recovered from the Pyroraptor. So just like your mom told you growing up, don't believe everything you see in movies. So these two competing worldviews that influence how we handle dinosaurs, creation and evolution, again, they can't coexist. We both have the same evidence. So again, it's the same fossils, it's the same DNA in a microscope, it's the same universe way to look at it in the telescope. The difference is how we interpret the evidence. And really only one can be right. The Bible tells us that God created our world and universe in 6 literal days. Oh, we just lost the video. See if it'll come back. Well, while they're working on that, so God created man in his image, and Adam and Eve's sin corrupted the world and separated us from God. Genesis describes Noah's worldwide flood, and afterwards, when humans built the Tower of Babel, God created many different languages and spread out the people all over the earth. According to the Bible, our world is very young. Dinosaur fossils and rock layers are strong evidence of Noah's flood, which was 4,500 years ago, which to me is a long time ago, but in reference to other things, it's not that long ago. But if you don't believe in creation, the only alternative is evolution, which basically says that God is not necessary. Okay, so this should come back up fairly quickly. I'll try it on my end. There it is, look at that. So evolution requires faith in random unguided accidents being able to create, given enough time. God's miracles aren't allowed, so everything must be explained by naturalistic processes that we observe today. And it starts with cosmic evolution, which says everything came from nothing with no purpose 13.7 billion years ago via the Big Bang Theory. And then you have chemical evolution. It's an unproven, unsubstantiated idea that life spontaneously created itself in a mud puddle. And then that goes into biological evolution, which is an unobserved process where a single cell evolved into every complex living thing we see on the earth today over millions of years. So these are huge problems with all these supposed processes, and it basically says that given enough time, a bunch of random unguided processes can build a Boeing 747. Again, we all know that that really is not how it works. Now, this airplane is nowhere as close to being as complex as even the most simplest life form. So choosing which is right between biblical young Earth or an evolutionary millions of years old Earth really does matter because your worldview informs how you interpret everything that you see. And really it's about authority. Is God's word the ultimate truth or is it man's flawed interpretation? So put another way, if we trust the Bible on the big thing about heaven and hell for eternity, shouldn't we extend that same trust to the book of Genesis? All the Bible needs to be trustworthy or this God-breathed book quickly falls apart. You can't pick and choose which parts you think are correct. Now, God was present at the very beginning, and it is his eyewitness account of how things happened is much more trustworthy than fallible science trying to figure it out thousands of years after the fact. So dinosaurs are not a problem for Christians. We just need to think about them from a biblical perspective. So for 23 years, this was my office. This is Afghanistan in 2016. And looking out the canopy, I can see pretty clouds and mountains, but there's a lot more going on that I can't see with just my eyes. So thanks to some very cool technology, when I have my visor down, I can see a tactical display which gives me a completely new perspective of reality. It'll project images on my lens, and I can see the good guys, the bad guys, where my radar is looking, where my wingman is looking. And so yes, this can be a little scary, but it's accurate. So in that similar view, viewing dinosaurs with a biblical lens can give us an accurate perspective of these animals. So when we start with the Word of God, dinosaurs fit much better into history than the evolutionary story with millions of years. So this tool that's been used to promote evolution can instead be used to introduce people to the gospel. I know we have some parents and grandparents. Your kids love dinosaurs, and we'll see this in just a minute. So guys, what kind of dinosaur is this? Help me out. Yeah, say it loud, you got it. Yeah, Triceratops. Awesome. All right, so here's a question about Triceratops, though. When did God make Triceratops? So here's a couple of possible answers. Was it millions of years ago? Creation day 5? Creation day 6? Or we don't know, we'll have to wait till heaven to find out. That's a pretty good answer, but let's go through it anyway. So Exodus 20:11, when God gave the Ten Commandments, he reminded us, for in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, the sea and all that is in them, and rested on the seventh day. So Triceratops is certainly part of all. And this is our recap of the entire Genesis creation week. On day 1, God created light and darkness. Day 2, he separated the skies and waters. Day 3, he formed dry land and seas, the trees and plants. I said that day this morning wrong too. Day 3, he formed the dry land, seas, the trees and plants. Day 4 was the sun, moon, and stars. Day 5, fish and birds. And day 6, all the land animals, to include the dinosaurs. And specifically to day 6, Genesis 1:25 says, "And God made the beasts of the earth according to their kinds, and the livestock according to their kinds, and everything that creeps on the ground according to its kind. And God saw that it was good." So yes, all the land animals were made on day 6. So creation day 6, very good. All right, everyone knows this guy. Who's this? Tyrannosaurus Rex, which is Latin for the tyrant lizard king. Now, the more compelling question is, what was the fearsome Tyrannosaur's original diet? The question here is original. Was he a plant eater, a meat eater, or both? Okay, yeah. So you guys, you're up on your knowledge already. So Genesis 1:30 says, "And to every beast of the earth, and to every bird of the heavens, and to everything that creeps on the earth, everything that has a breath of life, I have given every green plant for food." And it was so. So T-Rex, the awesome T-Rex, he ate at the salad bar, along with all the other animals in original creation. So he was a plant eater. And this kind of makes sense, right? Because at the beginning, after God had created everything on the 6th day, he declared that what he had made was very good. So if you're eating other animals, which implies death, that could not possibly be part of very good. Okay, but what about all those teeth and fangs? Just like this cartoon says, what were the purpose of those? And this is a great question. So let's take a look at some bears. These are 6 modern bears. You've got the polar bear at the top left. This guy definitely eats meat. But then the panda bear, what does he eat? Bamboo, right. So he doesn't eat any meat whatsoever. And then the sloth bear down at the bottom right, he's from India, termites and ants, sugarcane, and mangoes. So also kind of a vegetarian. But let's take a look at their skulls. So if you just found their skulls, they all have sharp teeth, those scary fangs and whatnot. So again, just because we see that doesn't mean that that's what they have to eat. So what do you think this animal, what animals does this skull belong to? Any ideas? All right. What if I told you it is a fruit bat? This is not a trick question. What is the diet of a fruit bat? Fruit. Again, scary looking animal. If you dug this out of the ground, you might think that this was a meat eater, but it is a fruit bat that eats fruit. This lion refused to eat meat its entire life. She enjoyed 9 years of a happy vegetarian life. So again, just because you start out or you think that they're meat eaters doesn't mean that they have to be. So and then last question, if you're in the kitchen and you're cutting up some fruit or whatever, do you want to use a sharp knife or a dull knife? Sharp knives are safer. So we think that Tyrannosaur was, and this is what the Bible says, he was a really, really, really good plant eater initially. And then let's consider Isaiah's prophecy about the restored new creation, which is also consistent with Revelation's description of the new heavens and new earth. Isaiah 11 says, "The wolf shall dwell with the lamb, and the leopard shall lie down with the young goat, and a little child shall lead them, and the lion shall eat straw like the ox." So this was God's original intent for his creation. Vegetarian dinosaurs walking around the Garden of Eden alongside Adam and Eve is a very, very different history compared to the secular view of dinosaurs tearing each other apart 65 million years ago, isn't it? So again, these two worldviews can't be further apart. But then the question is, am I really making a big deal out of nothing? Does it really matter if dinosaurs are 6,000 or millions of years old? Well, that's why we're here today, so let's find out. So after 6 literal days of creation and before the fall, God said his creation was what? Very good. Again, this is paradise. There's no death, meat eating, no disease, no decay, no barbecue. But we don't live in a place like that today. And that's because God gave Adam and Eve a warning and said, do not eat of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, or what? That's right, you will surely die. So they disobeyed God, and this is when death entered the world, not millions of years ago. So if you put dinosaurs eating each other, all these fossils and millions of years prior to Adam and Eve, you're going directly against what the Bible says, and you're putting death before sin. And that puts Adam and Eve walking on a fossil graveyard of suffering, disease, and death. I can't see God calling this very good. And in rock layers all over the earth, we find thorns and thistles, cancer and fossils. These are all consequences of Adam's original sin. And the Bible is clear that death was the direct result of Adam's sin. Romans 5:12 says, "Therefore, just as sin entered the world through one man, and death through sin, and in this way death came to all men because all sinned." So as a review, dinosaurs were created on day 6. They lived with man, and all animals were initially plant eaters until sin entered the world. Now, we don't know exactly when animals started turning on each other, but it was certainly after Adam's sin. And even after the fall, about 50%, so half of all the theropod dinosaurs, so T-Rex and Raptors types, they continued to eat plants. It was only after exiting the ark when God gave people permission to eat meat, and that's in Genesis 9:3. So again, putting on our biblical glasses, the Bible's historical account of Noah's flood really makes the most sense of what we see in the world regarding dinosaurs. The rock layers are straight, even layers found everywhere, and there's no evidence of burrowing, signs of life like plant roots and erosion. Fossils are also found everywhere and in many different layers, including clams at the top of Mount Everest. Again, this is all best explained by Noah's flood. And fossils show lots of evidence of meat eating, including cancer and disease, which is to be expected 1,500 years after Adam's sin and our world groaning under the curse. So we have fossils that show dinosaurs and many other animals attacking and eating each other. This is the Tyrannosaurus rex tooth found in a hadrosaur tailbone. And the hadrosaur survived the attack because the bone drew around the tooth, fusing the joints together. So not only was the attack pretty painful, but this would also be a pretty painful existence going forward. We also know what dinosaurs ate. How do we know that? Because we have dinosaur poop that's been fossilized. It's called dinosaur coprolite. So we can tell what they ate. Here's some examples of it. Again, more evidence that it had to be a rapid burial because you don't see cow patties turning into fossils these days. And we found that dinosaurs not only ate meat, but they also discovered that they ate grass. And this is notable because many evolutionists used to believe that grass did not evolve until 10 million years after the dinosaurs all went extinct. And yet we know that they ate grass because we can find it in their coprolite. Now, I'm from Atlanta, so this is from our own Atlanta Fernbank Museum, and it says on their little placard that grass did not yet exist in the time of dinosaurs. And yet we know it did because we find it in their coprolite. This slide shows evidence that dinosaurs from India ate rice. This also is astonishing for evolutionists because they thought rice did not evolve until well after the dinosaurs died out. And then finally, this is Titanosaurus. They are from India and they also ate grass. So based on the recent evidence, the evolutionary age of grass has had to double to 113 million years ago. Again, this is more evidence that science is always trying to play catch up to the latest discovery, and it's not like perfect from the beginning. So I mentioned these, yes. So the most plausible history actually was given to us in Genesis. So this is from Job 40. It says, "Behold behemoth, which I made as I made you. He eats grass like an ox." So the Bible's had it right all along. Now we also know what dinosaurs ate by examining their stomach contents. So this guy has 3 partially digested birds in his stomach. So dinosaurs eating birds, that'll become important soon. Many evolutionists say that dinosaurs and birds never coexisted, but dinosaurs evolved into birds 65 million years ago, which is about the time when dinosaurs went extinct. Have you guys heard that? That dinosaurs evolved into birds? That was not something that I grew up hearing about, and so I was surprised to know that that's what they're teaching now. But clearly that is not the case because we have dinosaurs eating birds. This dinosaur fossil had 3 mammal jaws in his gut. And this mammal has 3 dinosaurs in his gut. And we find mammal fossils and dinosaur fossils intermixed all the time. So this evidence proves that mammals and dinosaurs lived alongside each other, again, preserved by Noah's flood. Yeah, this might be kind of new information, but again, if you're wearing those biblical glasses, this is to be expected. So if dinosaurs were contemporary with mankind and all the other animals created on day 5 and 6, well, what happened to them during the flood in Genesis? Many Christians think perhaps that the flood caused all the dinosaurs to go extinct. But is that what the Bible says? Have you seen a children's book with dinosaurs on the ark? Well, why not? If they were alive at the time of the flood, they must have been on board the ark. Genesis 6:19 says, "And of every living thing of all flesh, you shall bring 2 of every sort into the ark to keep them alive with you. They shall be male and female." So you may have grown up kind of seeing this image as Noah's Ark. It's cute, it's an oversized, overcrowded bathtub. Giraffes are sticking their necks out. Everybody's happy, even though the world as they know it is perishing around them. But is this accurate, and does it help people trust the Genesis account? So if this is your idea of Noah's Ark, even one medium-sized stegosaurus would capsize the ark. So let's get a realistic image of what the ark is in our minds, because God gave very specific instructions to Noah on how to build the ark, and it was huge, like a modern-day container ship. So these are the dimensions given in the Bible for a very large ark. Now, what are cubits? Well, it's about an elbow. So you tip your fingers to your elbow. So it's about 1.5 feet. So based on that, when we do the conversion, Noah's Ark was about 450 feet long, 75 feet wide, and 45 feet tall. And here's 2 people on the top of it for reference. So this ark is huge. You can fit 522 freight train cars inside the ark. And just one freight train can hold about 100 sheep. Of course, that's too crowded of a space for an entire year, but again, it's an enormous amount of space that's on the ark. So the ark was big, but dinosaurs were big too, right? I mean, they could be the size of your truck or even a house. So how could they fit? All right, kids, what kind of dinosaur is this? Stegosaurus, that's right. So these are big dinosaurs, but it turns out they didn't start out that way. So unlike mammals, who have live births with some very large babies, like large baby elephant or a horse, all dinosaurs laid eggs. And unlike the movies, the largest dinosaur egg was really no bigger than twice the size of an American football. So even big dinosaurs had to start out as small dinosaurs. And here's some more pictures of some eggs. So there's 2 reasons that God would not want really big dinosaurs on the ark. Well, one, they're too big. But second is, what is the purpose of these animals after the flood year? What are they supposed to do when they come off the ark? They're supposed to repopulate the earth, right? Make more babies. So you don't want grandma and grandpa dinosaur on the ark. You want a bunch of small, young adolescents so then they can repopulate the earth once they come off the ark. And a recent study from paleontologists determined that Tyrannosaurus rex had a slow and steady growth for almost its entire life. So it makes sense that it would be on the ark as a small dinosaur. Now I bring up this slide because we used to talk about how we thought that dinosaurs had a growth spurt after about 5 years. But this is now kind of old science. So again, science is always catching up to itself and changing. So now this is the slide, but it still makes sense that they would be small animals early in their life when they're on the ark. And it turns out that not all the dinosaurs are big and scary. So this is from Jurassic Park, and this is not meant to be a baby dinosaur, but a full-grown Compsognathus. So this is either a very small dinosaur or a very large, scary girl. So the ark is huge. Most dinosaurs are not, and even the big ones on the ark are small kids. But one other question remains: how many different dinosaurs did Noah need on the ark? Now, you can find some places that tell you that there's 700 species of dinosaurs. That means you need 1,400 dinosaurs on the ark, and that's a lot. But sometimes 3 dinosaur fossils are given 3 different names, but they're really the same dinosaur species. So think about all the various dog breeds. Here's a Chihuahua and a Great Dane. If you found just their skeletons, you might think that they are entirely different species, but they're all dogs. And the Bible doesn't use the word species, but it says 2 of every kind went on the ark, which is a lot more encompassing. So this slide shows the suborder of Ceratopsia. God, given genetics, provides all these built-in variations to produce these pretty different hairstyles of ceratops. So we know that we can have lots of variation, and they're still within the same kind of creature. So we can breed a lion and a tiger and get a liger, which suggests that there's one giant cat kind. And thanks to modern genetics, we know that wolves have all the genetic information to account not only for the wolves, but also for dogs. So one wolf pair on the ark can account for the entire canine family: wolves, coyotes, dingoes, jackals, and dogs. Pretty cool stuff. So considering all that, there's only about 60 different dinosaur kinds. So we went from 1,400 down to 120 dinosaurs needed on the ark. Noah's job just got a lot easier. And again, that goes for all the animals. There's one horse kind, one cat kind, one wolf or dog kind. So Noah needed at a maximum 16,000 animals, and at a minimum only about 2,000 animals. So somewhere in between that, and there's plenty of space, again, on the ark for all of those scenarios. So if dinosaurs are on the ark, and that means there have to be surviving dinosaurs after the ark, right? And we'll get to these guys in a bit. But what happened to the individual animals that did not make it on the ark? Well, God's word says that the flood was catastrophic. Not just rain, but the fountains of the deep burst forth. It was a huge geological event, volcanoes, shifting continents, the moon was still causing tides, and you had a lot of turmoil below the surface. And moving water, as we know, is very powerful, generating lots of erosion and sediment, creating the conditions needed to make fossils, and to make them very quickly. And we have lots of evidence of animals being buried quickly in sediments and water and then turned into stone. We have fossils representing pretty much everything that was alive at the time of Noah's flood. Dinosaurs, plants, birds, mammals, reptiles, fish. We've uncovered millions of fossils. And as expected, with our biblical glasses on, many of these fossils look like modern animals from today. But you know what fossils we don't find? Well, evolution predicted that we would find lots of transition fossils, animals moving from one kind to a different kind. But we don't find any of those in the fossil record. And we also have not seen anything happening today that would suggest anything is transitioning to another kind of animal. So this is from our own scientists. One can be confident that the evolutionary view of Earth history is wrong, and the record in the rocks and the fossils makes much more sense in the light of the Bible's account, in the Bible's account of creation, the fall, and the flood. Again, we have lots of evidence that dinosaur fossils are a result of Noah's flood. Unfortunately, what we've been taught about fossil formation doesn't really work. The story that we hear all the time is the dinosaur dies, remains relatively undisturbed as he sinks slowly to the bottom, gets covered in sediment, fossilized over millions of years, and then later discovered. But this is not what we actually observe. So to test this process, scientists put a deceased pig at the bottom of the sea. Then they even installed a cage around it to protect it from large predators. So they're artificially keeping this guy undisturbed. And look what happens in just 1 week. 7 days. So the bones do not fall neatly into place. You can't even tell that this was a pig. And chemistry says that all the bones will dissolve in seawater in just a few years. When was the last time that you saw a picture of the bottom of the ocean littered with dead things waiting to be slowly covered? Right? It's just not there. So long, slow processes simply cannot make a fossil. You need a rapid burial, which again is exactly what we would expect out of Noah's flood. So this is the, one slide too fast. This is the fighting dinosaurs fossil. It's a velociraptor and a proceratops. They were actively fighting each other when they were quickly buried, perfectly preserved. So this had to happen fast. And this is the artist's conception of these two fossils. This is a fossilized mammal and dinosaur. They were frozen in volcanic mud when they were actively fighting each other, neither willing to let go as they were instantly buried. Now, if there was a worldwide flood, we would expect to see billions of dead things buried in rock layers, laid down by water all over the earth. And what do we find? Billions of dead things buried in rock layers, laid down by water all over the earth. And we actually have something called fossil graveyards, as if many species were swept away and all collected together. The dominant fossil, freshwater clams, in amongst all these dinosaurs. So it is not a habitat frozen in time, but more of what we might expect from a cataclysmic event like Noah's flood. And this photo is from what's called a mega bone bed. It's a mass graveyard covering over a square mile. So one explanation was that this was a local flood, but these are huge creatures, and what kind of event could kill thousands of huge dinosaurs, gather them all together, and bury them so quickly that they don't decay? And they were found in the middle of Canada, nowhere near a coast. All right, also, check out these fossils. So what neck position do you see in all these dinosaur fossils? So look closely at their necks. They're dramatically bent back. It happens so often that it's called the oppositonic death pose. And Alicia Cutler from Brigham Young University in Utah did an experiment with dead chickens. Now, dinosaurs are not related to birds, but they have the same ligament in the back of their neck. She placed dead chickens on a bed of sand for 3 months. Nothing happened. Then she took 7 dead chickens and placed them in cool fresh water, and within seconds, the necks arched and their heads were thrown back. So all these dinosaurs were in water when they were instantly buried. And they're also, again, beautifully preserved, unlike that pig that couldn't even make it a week. Now, how we find ankylosaur fossils also suggests that they died in a catastrophic flood. So scientists, as they were uncovering all these ankylosaur dinosaurs, recognized an odd pattern in their fossils. 70% of these heavily armored dinosaurs are found upside down. So a recent Canadian study of ankylosaurs determined that their center of gravity is different than their center of buoyancy. So quoting from their research, we used computer modeling to show that ankylosaurs likely flipped over due to a phenomenon called bloat and float, where the gases that accumulate inside the bloating belly of the dead carcass cause the animal to flip over while suspended in water. All right, so here's one more example of evidence of a worldwide flood, and these are called sauropod handstands. So first, when was the last time that your footprints turned into stone? Probably not, right? You come back a week later and your footprints are gone. So these very odd sauropod footprints, because only their front legs are leaving behind impressions. The most likely explanation, this is from secular and creation scientists, that they were floating in water and only their front legs could touch the ground. So are you seeing how what we know about dinosaurs is really best explained by the Genesis account? So logically, if dinosaurs lived alongside us and their fossils are evidence of Noah's flood, only 4,500 years ago, we should have evidence that their fossils are quite young, not millions of years old, right? So this next example is very compelling evidence of the Genesis timeline. We find red blood cells in dinosaur bones. And it's not just once, we've now discovered it many, many times over. At first, the secular scientists said this is not possible, but it happens so often now that it's widely accepted that we can find soft tissue in dinosaurs. Obviously a huge problem for millions of years. So this is a intact biomaterial. Again, it can't be millions of years old. We found collagen and other things in hadrosaurs. And we found, so this is collagen. Under the conditions that dinosaurs were thought to have lived in, collagen can't remain longer than 15,000 years. Now, yes, that is older than what the Bible says the world is, but again, that's a maximum age. And so nowhere close to 195 million years when the last hadrosaur was supposedly alive. Carbon dating also supports the Genesis account. So there's a common misunderstanding that carbon dating proves that dinosaurs are millions of years old, but it's actually quite the opposite. Carbon-14 has a very short half-life. It's 5,730 years, but that means that if there's carbon-14 in any substance, it can't be more than 100,000 years old. So I'll have to go this way. Whoop. Sorry, I'm catching back up. There we go. But we find carbon-14 in every single dinosaur bone that we've ever looked at. In fact, we've never put any carbon material in and tested it and not had carbon-14 in it. So it's always a young material. We also find carbon-14 in coal, in oil, and in diamonds, as we talked about this morning. Again, diamonds are thought to be the oldest carbon substance and millions of years old, but objectively, they can't be more than, again, a maximum age of 100,000 years. What about DNA? This is a very fragile molecule, and under the expected fossil conditions of about 77 degrees Fahrenheit, the best case is that fragments cannot last more than 22,000 years. But we find dinosaur DNA. Evolutionists need this to last about 3,000 times longer than it really does. So, yes, we have found dinosaur DNA. No, Jurassic Park is not going to happen anytime soon. We do not have enough to sequence an entire genome, but yes, we do find fragments of dinosaur DNA, which I think is pretty cool. So this is all evidence that dinosaurs lived only a few thousand years ago, again, just like the Bible has always told us. All right, so what about the dinosaurs that were on the ark? What does the Bible have to say about them? Well, it makes logical sense that dinosaurs survived the flood on Noah's Ark and therefore coexisted with humans after the flood. Now, the Bible never mentions the word dinosaur, does it? Well, Sir Richard Owen invented this word, dinosaur, in 1841. That was not even 200 years ago, well after the Bible was written. So before the word dinosaur was invented, what do you think biblical authors would have called giant animals with claws and teeth and horns? Well, dragons. So the original King James version written 200 years before dinosaur was invented used the word dragons. And now in the book of Job, which takes place after the flood, God is describing a creature called Behemoth, which must be familiar to Job, otherwise this dialogue would not make any sense. He says, "Behold Behemoth, which I made as I made you. He eats grass like an ox. Behold his strength in his loins, his power in the muscles of his belly. He makes his tail stiff like a cedar." It sure sounds like God is describing a sauropod dinosaur here in Job. Now, Behemoth is described as having a tail like a cedar, but no living animal has a tail like that today. And here's our biggest, animal. This is definitely not a cedar-like, tree tail. So tail like a cedar is more accurate for a sauropod. We also have some other examples. Here's a temple in Cambodia, and look at what the artist carved. In addition to other common animals, this was nearly 1,000 years ago. Looks like a stegosaurus. So 700 years before discovering the first dinosaur fossil, this artist drew a stegosaurus in Cambodia. It makes sense that the sculptor was familiar with the stegosaurus. And there's other examples, but again, they're not really definitive. The Chinese zodiacs, it has all common animals, and then it includes a dragon. And almost all cultures have legends of knights killing a dragon, or something like that. Again, are these just exciting stories, or is there a little bit of truth to them? So what happened to the dinosaurs? Well, there are lots of theories. Probably the most popular one is that an asteroid smashed into Earth, and all the dust in the atmosphere shielded the sun and cooled the Earth. You guys heard that? One of my oldest son graduated last year from Georgia Tech, and they were teaching him that it was not an asteroid, it was actually a very big volcano, but basically did the same thing. But that doesn't explain why very vulnerable, fragile animals like frogs and salamanders all survived, yet all the dinosaurs became extinct. Again, this is not logical. So what happened? Well, we know they died. I really can't tell you a whole lot more beyond that. They could have been hunted out. You're not going to let an alligator live in your backyard. And so they could have been hunted out. Big games like elephants and tigers, they're only still around because they're protected as endangered species. And a recent study claims that 55% of all the kinds of animals that were on the ark are now extinct. So the fact that the dinosaurs have gone extinct really is not that surprising. All right, so we've covered a lot today. I love how the dinosaur story neatly fits into biblical history. You see, dinosaurs, when properly viewed with our biblical glasses, they're our friends. Now remember, the evolutionary worldview of dinosaurs is a significant obstacle for people believing in Jesus and the Bible. So this is from 2010. It's a blogger. Unfortunately, he's now an atheist. And he said that dinosaurs were my gateway drug to atheism. And while I was still 6 or 7 years away from reaching the conclusion that God either didn't care about us or didn't exist, dinosaurs had shared an important secret, that the Bible can be wrong. So this is very sad, but there is hope, because reading Genesis as true history gives so much more clarity to the rest of the Bible and to what we see outside. There are a lot more questions, and they're answered best with a biblical worldview. So again, I challenge this group, challenge us to learn about dinosaurs and other creation-related topics so you can share this information with your family and your neighbors. All right, do you guys remember, if you have a creation-related topic, where do you go? Creation.com, very nice. I talked about this morning, and for the Creation magazine, there were some people said that they wanted to sign up, so we have sign-up forms in the back after the service. We'll be back there as well. All right. Because our children love dinosaurs, we have dinosaur packs and a lot of dinosaur books that are also available for purchase. Again, it shows a biblical story, so the biblical truth about dinosaurs that you're not going to find really anywhere else. Just as a little plug, because this book just came out, The First Adam to Last Adam. It is from our geneticist, Dr. Carter. So it gets really into the genetics that we find in the Bible, which is pretty interesting. All right. So as a Christian, being able to speak confidently about dinosaurs to our kids and grandkids and to our non-Christian friends is very important for strengthening their faith and confidence in the Bible. So I certainly hope I've piqued your interest today in learning how dinosaurs do a great job of complementing the Bible in the Genesis timeline. We have a couple of minutes. Is there any questions? So this is my presentation, but do you guys have any questions that I may not have covered about dinosaurs? Big kids and little kids. Yes, sir.
You mentioned it, I'm not sure if I missed it or I just don't understand where the Bible talks about kinds.
Mm-hmm.
Are dinosaurs as a whole a kind, or are there kinds of dinosaurs?
There are kinds of dinosaurs, and so you can maximize the species of dinosaurs to say there's about 700, but when you whittle them down to the kinds, there's only about 60 kinds. 60. So Noah only needed to bring 60 pairs or 120 dinosaurs on the ark, and then after the ark, they can then speciate and variation and change to all the dinosaurs that would have been afterwards. So. Yes, sir.
So the bones that we're finding happened during the flood?
That's right. Yeah, so, God judged not just humans, but he judged the entire earth, which is why the entire earth is flooded. And so the bones that we find basically in all the rock layers are from Noah's flood, and it represents everything that was alive at the time. And that's why we can see not only different, and we see a lot of the variation because they'd been around for 1,500 years since the beginning of the earth. And so they'd already started to have different variations amongst themselves, like the same ceratops, if you will, like the slide showed. That make sense? All right, great. Yes?
As far as other dinosaurs mentioned in the Bible, I think mentioned the lion considered a dinosaur as well, or is it something else?
We don't know because it's aquatic. So it may not fit the definition of dinosaur, but is definitely a very large sea creature. Yeah.
He did say in deep waters too. So
Yes.
I can agree that would still be a dinosaur because you just read the words that said in deep waters.
That's right. Dinosaurs.
Believe that there's dinosaurs in land and under the water.
Okay. So the definition of a dinosaur is actually based on like their hip structure. So a sea creature, even though it is an ancient dinosaur era, if you will, kind of weird creature, they don't really are classified as dinosaurs because of their hip structure and laying eggs and stuff like that. But they are definitely old. We don't really see them around anymore. Make sense? Yes, ma'am. In the back.
Komodo dragons and lizards and stuff now, do you think those are?
No, so they're still reptiles, and if you look at, this kind of goes back to our definition of dinosaurs. So if you look at a sauropod, let me see if I can get how fast I can get back to our sauropod dinosaur. There it goes. So there, if you look at kind of how their arms connect, they're very straight. And if you look at a lizard, their arms go out first. And so those are definitely lizards, and they're not remnants of dinosaurs. That's a great question, though. All right. Well, guys, thank you very much for your time and attention. Again, I'll be at the back if you want to have any questions about the books or whatnot. And I hope this is really good for you. So thanks for being here tonight.